Hello, YouTube world. Gordon Causey, once again, coming to you very early in the morning. Well, not very early, 2:08 a.m. on Tuesday, the 16th of August. So very early Tuesday morning. And what did I title this? I don't have titled it "The Evolution of Science" and what may be coming this fall and winter. Um, First, talk about the evolution of science. Is science something that evolves? I'm going to give you my take, my non expert take on things. Um, Science to me is not a thing so much as it is a process, it's an investigative process. And that investigation, it evolves over time. And so things that we believe to be true at one point, we find out later that we were wrong. But no one likes to say they were wrong. So rather than saying, well, we got it wrong, we're hit with the line that we've heard countless times, well, the science evolved. You'll remember at the very start of COVID, I guess, January, February, we were being told things like, the chances of human to human transmission are incredibly small. In my country where I live, Canada, we had Dr. Theresa Tam, who's this country's chief medical officer of health. She was saying there's no need to impose travel restrictions on people coming into Canada from places like China or Italy or what have you, because it's not, we learned so much during the SARS outbreak. That was back in 2003, 2004. I forget exactly what year. We learned so much. Don't worry, we got this in hand. Sure, be aware of it, but don't be overly concerned about it. We got this. And then they said that, oh my gosh, it is highly transmissible. Did they say they were wrong? No. I mean, I remember when the Americans, when the Trump administration, they brought in travel restrictions. I think it was in February. They brought in travel restrictions. They couldn't restrict Americans coming back into the United States. You can't deny a citizen access to their own country. But others, they did bring in some restrictions on people coming in from Europe, people coming in from China. And critics of the Trump administration said that it was an overreaction, that it was stigmatizing people, that it was xenophobic and all this. I found it ironic that later on they said you didn't do enough. He did, they did something in the United States, and then later they said, and that little thing that they did gets criticized as being an overreaction, and then later told, well, you didn't do enough. Yeah. But the point I'm getting at is that science, our understanding evolves, but the facts don't change. Was SARS-CoV-2 highly transmissible human to human in January and February? I would submit that yes, it was. We just didn't know it yet. And we can go on, all kinds of, I talk about in my last video, I think it was, I talked about the masks and how they said at the start, everyone from Anthony Fauci, Theresa Tam, Ontario's former chief medical health officer, they all went public. We're all in the news talking about the fact that they weren't requiring masking at the start because people don't know how to properly wear or handle masks, that it makes things worse rather than improving them. And they never walked that back. They never said that. When they brought in the mask mandates, they never told you, never talked about proper handling procedures, proper wearing, how to wear a mask properly. And all the signs and all the public messaging was just wear a mask. Well, wear a chin strap and constantly touch the outside and touch everything, and forget everything you learned in grade 7 health class, for goodness sakes, when you were 12, 13 years of age. Okay. But the thing is, as I've written in the description, over this summer in Ontario, we finally got rid of the mask mandates back in March. And thank goodness, because things have been so much better since then. In January, February of a year ago, and I'm talking about December 2020 and January 2021, if you look at Ontario's hospitalization numbers, there's a big spike. And then March, April, immediately following, an even bigger spike. Seemed to be the pattern. The December, January spike would be big, and then the one that would come in March and April would be bigger. But then this year, we again, in that same December now 2021 into January 2022, we had that big spike again, and it came down. And then the anticipated March, April spike came, but they removed the mask mandate. And our hospitalization numbers never got close to what they had been in the previous spike. And the only, among all the variables that had changed, the big one that I see is that, well, the mask mandate was over. And I have to wonder, open speculation, lots of people still wore a mask, even though they were no longer mandated. You still see people pulling them out of their dirty pockets and dirty purses and wearing them like a chin strap and pulling them down when they go into a restaurant, putting them on a table for other people to touch, and then picking them up and putting them back on, constantly touching and touching. I have to wonder if everyone had gotten rid of their those little disease, germ rags. I speculate that things might very well have been even better, but it's a moot point, meaning we can debate it until the end of time because we'll never have a definitive answer with empirical proof. Well, let's get to where we are now. So it's the summer. COVID's pretty much, hardly anyone talks about it anymore. Yay. But now everyone's talking about monkeypox. So we have this monkeypox virus that they're hardly doing any testing for. I was looking at the numbers in Great Britain, and their positivity rate on tests up until I think it was July 20th was damn near 50%. And Ontario just recently came out with their numbers, and our positivity rate in my province of Ontario, Canada, was darn near 1 in 3. It was in a CTV news article. I think the specific number was 32%. Darn near 1 in 3 tests are coming back positive. But from the very start, from May until August, whenever that article came out, over that entire almost 3-month-long period, they'd only done 1,600 tests, over 2+ months. Province of Ontario, when it was COVID, we would have 10, 20, 30, 40,000 tests a day. I think we peaked, I think it was north of 60,000 per day at the highest levels of testing. So how bad is monkeypox spreading? How widespread is it? I remember that back during COVID, the LA County Public Health Board, in conjunction with experts from Stanford University, they did widespread serological testing, where they were testing people for antibodies to see, well, how big is this? We have identified cases from randomized testing, but that's just a snapshot. How widely is this spreading? And their research found that the number of infections could actually have been as much as 55 times higher than what testing was identifying. And so the only way to do this, and this is what they used to do in years gone by, is they would go and they would try to take a representative sample of a population and then do antigen testing, serological testing, where they test for antibodies to see how widespread something is. But, we don't do things the way we used to do them. Everything's got a new protocol now. And the one that Stanford and the LA Board of public health that they did was criticized widely because to recruit, you want to get a cross section, you want to, age, racial communities, everything. You want it to be a representative sample of the population. And so what they did to recruit people into this study who were a representative cross section of LA County is they used Facebook. And that was one of the criticisms. Well, they use Facebook. Well, who cares? Who cares what? And so what matters isn't what method you use to get that sample. The question is it a representative sample? So long as it's a representative sample, fine. Whether you walked around on the street or whether you use Facebook or Twitter or Getter or whatever, so long as it's a representative sample, then should give you a pretty good idea as to how widely a virus or a pathogen is spreading. So how bad is monkeypox going to be? My own personal non-expert opinion is, given the fact that you can verify any of this, it's said to have as long as a 3-week long, 21-day incubation period. So, meaning that the incubation period is the period of time where a person's infected but is not yet experiencing symptoms. So they have no idea that they're sick. They have no idea that they're infected. How do we know we're infected? How do we know we have something? Is we get sick. Lymph nodes, people will refer to it as swollen glands, fever, muscle ache, joint pain, whatever. All the symptoms, we all know them. But the incubation period, there's none of that. No one's experiencing any symptoms. And the whole notion, and it's debated, is a disease, is a virus transmissible in a pre-symptomatic period? I believe most experts believe it is, that in the days leading up to the onset of symptoms that people are actually infectious, but they don't know they're sick. And so, they're pulling a mask out of their pocket, and then they're putting it on their face. And they've done research as well. And again, you can look this up. They've gone into hospital rooms where they know that people have monkeypox. They have a confirmed monkeypox infection, and they've tested airborne aerosols, and they've found presence of the monkeypox virus in those airborne aerosols. It exists in the aerosols. Now, does that mean it's an airborne virus? From what I understand, again, non-expert, is that everything's dependent upon something called viral load. Is there enough virus in the aerosols to infect and get someone sick? And unfortunately, as I understand it, they can't do the testing required because it would be unethical. It will require taking a healthy person, not infected with the virus, and then to expose them to it. And then I would ask the question, is it one size fits all? Will the same amount of viral load get everyone infected, or will some individuals be able to fight off an infection and not be infected because perhaps they have a more robust immune system? I've read numerous articles that vitamin D deficiency is common among people with weakened immune systems. So, is it one size fits all? My own personal non-expert opinion is I wouldn't think so. I wouldn't think that everyone is equally susceptible to a viral infection. I think that's a reasonable proposition, but I'm not an expert. I've continually asked. I would love to have a mature, intelligent, reasoned discussion with someone who has the requisite bona fides in virology, infectious disease, and to talk about this. But crickets. willing to do a Zoom podcast type thing, but no one's willing to talk. So we're left to, layperson like me looking for answers. The media certainly doesn't ask any of the questions. They won't even tell you how many tests are being done. That article I saw on CTV was the first I saw that, and it only came out within the last few days, that cited an actual positivity rate. We used to get that daily with COVID. Tell us the positivity rate is 7, it's 8, it's 6, whatever it was, they would tell us. Now, crickets. Not the kind you eat. So what's going? So we've got COVID still around, as jabbed or not. People are still getting infected repeatedly. We're seeing it with our politicians. I think Trudeau's had at least twice, at least. I think it may even be 3 times. That's an open question as to whether that was just politically motivated and for a chance for him to play groundhog and go underground. Strongly, I think that's a very strong possibility. So we have still COVID out there. We have monkeypox out there. And we were told for ages that rates of viral transmission increase during cold weather, during so-called flu season, which in Canada typically starts sometime in early October and ends sometime in March or April. So the weather's going to get cold. I know that last year in my part of Ontario, southern Ontario, that we were still having double-digit Celsius temperatures well into October. And I remember COVID numbers were going up significantly in the provinces of Alberta and their cities like Edmonton and Calgary, and even in Vancouver, but their temperatures were much lower. I was doing comparisons, and we were unseasonably warm, and they were about normal. They got cold. And it wasn't until late October that the temperatures really started to, drop into the single digits here, and we started to get down close to, in and around and touching 0 Celsius. If you're an American, 0 degrees Celsius is, I think, 32 degrees Fahrenheit. When you look at 20 degrees Celsius, you're looking somewhere around 70 degrees Fahrenheit. I grew up in the United States. Spent almost 10 of my first 12 years growing up. I actually like Fahrenheit better than Celsius, but neither here nor there. So there's COVID, we got monkeypox. Now we're hearing from Theresa Tam, just came out in the past few days, that they're going to be increasing wastewater surveillance in, I imagine, large cities. I imagine they'll be doing it in Calgary, Edmonton, Toronto, Ottawa, Vancouver, in the large urban centers. And they're going to be doing it for both monkeypox. They were doing it for COVID. I think it started in December, January, February is when they started doing this wastewater surveillance for COVID. Well, now they're going to start doing it for monkeypox as well as polio. So COVID, monkeypox, polio. Is there anything else? Well, Taiwan's CDC, they have a Centers for Disease Control like the United States. And they've identified, I believe it is 35 cases, and I'm probably not going to pronounce this right, but I'm going to call it Langia henipavirus. It's Langya. And the second word is henipavirus, which I'm pronouncing H-E-N-I, or which is spelled Henipavirus virus. So Langia henipavirus, which is apparently an incredibly serious virus. And as far as the reporting out on it is that all 35 cases are believed to have occurred from shrew, which is a small rodent. I think I would describe it as looking a little bit like a mole. So the shrew contact between humans and shrews, and that's been the mode of transmission. So we had um, COVID, which we were told came from a bat into the human population. Then we got monkeypox, which is a bit of a misnomer because they say that it primarily comes from rodents like rats, and there was a case of prairie dog transmission into humans. That was the primary driver of transmission, and now we have this Henipa, Langya henipa virus, which comes from shrews, another rodent-like creature. I don't know if a shrew is technically a rodent or not. Um, so there's three. There's another one you can search up, and that's Marburg, Marburg, Marburg virus, which is a form of hemorrhagic fever, which is an incredibly virulent virus or pathogen. I remember it best from an old episode of MASH where it tore through, and they had all kinds of patients. Their kidneys were shutting down. Apparently, that's quite common. It attacks the kidneys, and so COVID, monkeypox, polio, Langya henipa virus, Marburg. What else? Maybe monkeypox will die off, and this Langya henipa virus will stay as shrew to human and not transmit human to human. But what else is coming? And want to address the bit of the elephant in the room, and I think a lot of people are thinking along these lines. I don't think I'm unique in any fashion, in any respect whatsoever. We have 8 billion people on this planet. If you go to worldmeters.com, they have a world population clock, and I think it's got us at 7.96 billion or something like that. But there was an article recently saying that population counting is an inexact science, and it's conceivable that we've already crested 8 billion. So I'm just going to call it 8 billion. We have 8 billion people living on this planet. And there are a lot of academic papers out there that contend that 8 billion is not sustainable. There's a big word we keep hearing. We keep hearing about the UN sustainability goals. How and what by having goals that are sustainable, what the suggestion is that the way the planet is, the way the world's population is operating now, that it's unsustainable, that we can't keep going the way we're going. We need drastic change. And what you can look up the Global Footprint Network, funded by the Gates Foundation. Surprise, surprise. And what they've put out, and University of Texas and other papers that I've looked at, they put out this idea that the planet as a whole only produces enough food, energy, and resources to sustain a population of 1.9 billion people on an annual basis. So every year, the renewable energy, food, raw materials that the planet can produce is only enough to sustain long-term 1.9 billion people. That begs the question, okay, wait a minute, if the planet only generates enough renewable resources to sustain 1.9 billion, how in the heck are we at 8? At more than 4 times that number. And what they put forward is they say that the reason we're able to have 8 billion now is because the planet had, past tense of the verb, had enormous reserves built up, but that we pretty much depleted them. That within the next 10 years, by the year 2030 roughly, that things like drinkable water, potable water, that it'll be in short supply, that it'll be a scarce commodity, that there won't be enough to go around. Some will remember, some people thought the Georgia Guidestones were conspiracy theory, but they were real, past tense, because they have been destroyed and demolished. This was a monument, sometimes referred to as America's Stonehenge. It was a Stonehenge type monument made of granite, and they popped up suddenly. 1980, I think, was the year. They started construction of them, I believe, in 1979. An anonymous individual went to a granite company in the township of Elberton, Georgia, which is something of a granite hotbed. They got lots of granite, I guess. And this anonymous individual, who used the pseudonym R.C. Christian, went to this company, would not divulge his identity, and company representatives, I think there's one or two of them who are still alive, they've refused to give any indication or any, they just say he's anonymous, and they're it's like they don't want to, no one's trying to find out who this R.C. Christian was, but apparently they have said that he claimed to represent a group of wealthy Americans, and they wanted this monument built, and it was incredibly mathematically precise, and it had astrological alignment like the pyramids or Stonehenge, and it had, you can read up on it, it had 10 guiding principles, kind of like a 10 commandments, which reeked of eugenics. And if you don't know what eugenics is, look it up. It was big during the Nazi Germany was the most famous country that tried to bring about a eugenics agenda. And their first rule was to maintain the world's population under 500 million. And their second one was to guide or to manage, I guess, human reproduction. Very Orwellian, imagine that. You want to have children? Oh, I'm sorry, you're not suitable. You do not have the characteristics we are looking for in the human race. That's the kind of crap we're talking about. And as most will know, the stones were vandalized, this Stonehenge type monument. I don't want to go on too long about it, but look into it. And if you look at past history, the three main drivers that have served as a brake, if you will, on human population are, and we're living it now, are, one is disease, Black Plague, or bubonic plague, or the Black Death of the Middle Ages was a major contributor to serving as a check on human population growth. So, well, look at COVID, monkeypox, polio, Henipa virus, Marburg virus, goodness knows what else might be coming. That's one. Another check on human population, of course, is war. And as we all know, we have a war going on right now between the Ukraine and Russia. We're all being programmed how to think and feel about it. So we have a war there. We also have countries, I believe it's Norway, not Norway, Sweden. We have countries now vying to join NATO, which is curious because these countries up until now, I believe Sweden has been non-aligned, and now it's making overtures wanting to join NATO. If you look back, if you know your history, you'll know that just prior to the outbreak of war during World War II, just prior to that, months prior, Poland and Britain became allies. In the lead up to World War One, going back 1914 now, in the lead up to World War One, the old Ottoman Empire, or the Turkish Empire, some call it, they were in negotiations with the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, who we typically call the Germans. They were in negotiations as well with Britain, with France, with Russia, the Russian Empire, and everyone knew war was coming, so they were getting their dance partners. The Ottomans actually almost aligned themselves with the Russian Empire, but ultimately I don't know what the Agas or whatever they call the senior leadership within their old empire did not want to ally themselves with the Russians because they figured the Russians would just come in and take them over. So after the war broke out, they had been already in negotiations with the Germans, and they signed on with them. That war, World War One, sometimes called the war to end all wars. Others refer to it as it was called the end of empire. So disease, war, what other? So right now we have Russia, Ukraine, but we also have what I'll refer to as saber rattling going on between China and Taiwan. Taiwan has never recognized, China has never recognized Taiwan as a independent nation. They consider it a breakaway territory, but it's still theirs. The Chinese regard Taiwan the same way that Federalist forces in the United States regarded the breakaway Confederate States, as an illegal secession. And that's the way the Chinese regard Taiwan. And I forget who it was, Pelosi or someone went over to Taiwan, to Taipei, and it caused the Chinese very shortly or during her visit started to fly exercises and to move warships into the area and everything. Tense situation. Then, of course, you have the Middle East, which is always, a volatile region. You have Israel, you have Iran. Those are the two principal powers in the area. You have Iran being accused of supporting, financing, arming terrorist groups within the Palestinian territory like Hamas and Hezbollah. So there's always the potential there. And so disease, war, and then famine. And I think we've all been seeing what's been going on in countries like the Netherlands, but it's also happening in Canada now, where they're putting enormous strain on farmers by increasing their costs for things, putting tariffs on things like vital fertilizer, which farmers need, and their diesel fuel to run their equipment. The prices have gone through the roof. And a lot of farmers are screaming that they're going to go bankrupt. And at the same time, we have in London, Ontario, Canada, a month or two ago, we had the announcement that they just built, with funding from the Clinton Foundation, the world's largest insect protein processing plant. And I believe I've heard from other people, but I haven't confirmed it myself. If you want to put a comment and tell me, or a link, that a second plant has opened up in that same general area. So are we on a path toward, are part of these sustainability goals to get the human population down to what's considered a manageable level, to a 1.9 billion? Even at 1.9 billion, that is merely according to, this global footprint, University of Texas and other studies. That's merely the point at which, at current rates of consumption, at current the rates at which we currently consume energy, food, raw materials, that's just enough to sustain. It's like basically having $1 million in the bank, generating $40,000 a year in interest income, and living just off the 40,000 without touching into the capital base. Or is the goal, Georgia Guidestones, 500 million or less? Last thing I'll leave you with, and I'll invite you to watch this. There was a BBC miniseries on one of their streaming networks. I believe it was called Utopia. And I'll invite you. You can watch scenes here on YouTube. There's one in particular where you'll see a gentleman. He is tied up to a chair, and he's being interrogated by two people. It's all very heavy British accents. And there's another guy standing at the back who's lost an eye and is wearing an eye patch. And it's a fascinating scene. You'll notice on the ceiling of the apartment flat where they're holding this guy that there's a Masonic square and compass, symbols of Freemasonry. And the plot of this show is that a product has been developed or is in the works, and it's called Janus. And the idea of Janus, and this was done in 2014-15, was to sterilize the world's human population. And what's happened is I don't know the full, I never watched it. I've just seen this particular scene and a couple others. And this individual is being interrogated, and he's giving it all up and trying to bring these young people who've captured him on side by explaining what he predicts is, the dire situation. He said, this planet now has over 7 billion people on it. When I was born 50 years ago, it was less than 3. And what I see is a world where, going to war for water and things like that. And one of the young captors, hits him with and says, but we're doing things. We're changing things. He goes, what? And he says, where do you think your food comes from, Ian? 30% of the world's soil is now useless due to soil degradation. And what's your solution? Energy light bulbs? And then he's hit with, so your solution is a kind of genocide. He goes, it's not genocide. The goal of Janus is to sterilize the human race, with 1 in 20 people remaining fertile. And then he projects, and this is where the 500 million number comes out. He said, we project that within 100 years, the human race, the population, the world's population will plateau at under 500 million. I think he said under, but he uses the figure 500 million. So those are just some things to think about, some things to be aware of. War, disease, famine, the 3 biggest checks on human population. We have COVID, monkeypox, polio. They're going to start checking for that. Lanyahanippa You can look that up. Just put Taiwan CDC virus into a search, and you'll see the articles. Marburg, you can do a search on that one as well. And who knows? Maybe that's just a starter set. So it's the end of my video. If you liked it, you're welcome to share. I didn't say anything about my Christian faith, and I should. If you are looking for answers, the Bible is the place to go. Eschatology is a word, well, it's a fancy word that people with their PhDs in theology like to toss around because it sounds big. It just means end times theology. And there are two aspects to what I'll call end times theology. There is the end times, the apocalypse, Armageddon, Book of Revelation, the four horsemen of the apocalypse, the cups being poured out, all that. There's that side of end times theology. But there's also another view that some have that's cyclical. And if you look at world history, even outside of biblical history, just look at world history, the Babylonians, the Jewish Empire, the Jewish kingdoms of which existed, of the northern kingdom of Israel, southern kingdom of Judah. They flourished and then they were conquered. Their world ended. The Assyrian Empire had its time and it ended. The Babylonians had their time and it ended. The Greek Empire under Alexander had its time and it ended. The Roman Empire had its time and it ended. End times come. Is it the end times? The end to end all ends? Might be. I don't know. But I do know that Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the light. And I know that this life is not the end. So I'll invite you to pick up your Bible. It's one thing about faith. You're not allowed to talk about it anymore. I'm 56 years of age now. I was born in 1966. And during my lifetime, faith, when I was younger, was respected. Now, faith is ridiculed. And I'm talking in the broader culture, and by that I mean media, in movies and films, TV. Religious characters portrayed in TV shows and in movies in the 60s and 70s were respected individuals. The 80s, that started to change, and it's gone downhill ever since. They always want to portray Christians as being kooky, crazy, whatever. And that's on purpose. I'm here to tell you that it's intentional. I'm going to say it's a power that does not want the name of Jesus Christ proclaimed. And we have to proclaim it. So I've gone on far too long, but that's my habit. Apologize for the poor quality, no production values, very crappy internet connection, very spotty, but what matters is the content. Don't judge a book by its cover. And God bless. Comments welcome. I like them. All right.